I want to share some reflections, kind of a little more, I don't say it's personal reflections maybe, but some thought on the thought of our founder, of Reverend Moon's thoughts. So I hope this will be helpful for you as a kind of introduction today. And this is always a very special moment in the year. We have this Peace Council meeting, and some faces I know, I recognize, and others, I'm very happy to see new faces too. Even one young lady I met on the bus. Where is she now? Here we go. And we were traveling on the bus together and getting off at the same spot. I already noticed her, and I thought she'd be excellent material for UPF, I thought, right? She was reading a very conscientious book and carrying some other literature, and I thought, I wonder. So I did ask her when she got off, are you going to the UPF meeting? And she said, yes, I am, right? So she was, there you go. Someone had already got there first. So. Sun Myung Moon, he founded the Federation for World Peace on August 28th, 1991. That was on the basis of some quite significant meetings, personal meetings with then President Mikhail Gorbachev. Is that a name that you recognize? Yes. Right, so that was very fascinating. In that inaugural speech, he challenged nations to reject the pursuit of their own narrow kind of individual interests in order to further world peace. And then when, in September 2005, he founded the Universal Peace Foundation, which became Federation, that's us. He envisioned it working with the United Nations, providing approaches that the existing UN could not provide. So he emphasized this new organization will perform the role of stopping strife and conflicts throughout the world by promoting religious and spiritual awakening. And he saw two roads, I think we all do, or two approaches. There's one of peace and unity, or there's conflict and division. So how to solve problems without the need to resort to fighting? That's very much the purpose of UPF. In these ideas, one can recognize the input of a person with a religious understanding and indeed spiritual concerns. But in character, I think this viewpoint, which I've outlined, it's beyond any particular faith. Right? Neither does the work of the UPF raise any barrier that doctrinal statements are bound to do whenever they are used. In addition, and this is kind of one point where I was immediately attracted when I first heard the message of Reverend Moon. It's kind of in the core teaching, what we call the Unification Principle or the Divine Principle. It's very respectful of the conscientious person. And I think that's very significant, actually. There's a kind of dichotomy, which we're familiar with, of believer and non-believer, which has a basic, it's a factual basis there, and it's a way to kind of categorize people. But, it's used too often, I would say, to condemn, and just as bad, to give a false sense of entitlement, actually, to some people. So, in a version of the principle, which I brought along with me today, if you haven't seen this, I want to recommend it to you. It's called The Essentials of the Unification Principle, and Robin and Margaret can help you get one of those if you'd like to read it. It has this particular explanation, which I'm going to kind of read to you and interject a few things along the way, if that's okay. The principle envisions a future in which enlightened and mature people of all cultures will grow to realize the ideal of true love. Now, already in the book, true love has been kind of explained. What is this true love? This means real, genuine love that is unconditional, unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. That's the kind of love we're talking about when we say true love. In the world they create, differences in culture will compose a beautiful tapestry of brightly varied but harmonious colors and shapes, I should add, right? Because this is Margaret's edition, right? Each person and cultural group will have its own unique characteristics and attributes, but joined with others will contribute to a larger, all-encompassing design. It's erroneous to think of the unity of religions as the achievement of common belief among all people. After all, no two people hold fully identical beliefs. Rather, religious unity should be conceived of as the achievement of harmonious relationships among diverse religious groups, grounded in mutual virtue and true love. To fulfill this ideal, Christians must become better Christians, Muslims better Muslims, Jews better Jews, Buddhists better Buddhists, Hindus better Hindus, and so on. Better meaning closer to the ideal of a true man or woman expressing true humanity. Ultimately, all men and women are destined to fulfill their full potential through the realization of what the teaching calls the three blessings. This is a diagram of the three blessings, right? And we're very familiar with this, maybe, but it's a fundamental purpose for which all people were created and will be fulfilled once men and women learn to fulfill their responsibilities fully. So here you see the first one deals with the individual. It's the kind of person of integrity, person of genuine love in this unconditional quality of love, a person who is mature spiritually. The second kind of blessing is that associated with marriage and family, finding your partner, creating your family, using that as a school of love which can prepare children as they grow up to become good citizens and, you know, part of a wider society where they're actually putting into practice the quality of love which they've learnt in the family. So in this way, we can talk about one world family or how we are all brothers and sisters. This kind of idea is there. It's not new, but it's very profound. And it's still really to be realized. We've still got to reach this kind of real realization of our joint humanity in this respect. The third one you see there relates to everything around us, our kind of dominion over creation, which means our creativity, our careers, our mastery of and dominion of the natural world, living in harmony with that world and preserving it for, you know, future generations. So the point about this is it's not really religious doctrine when you analyze it. This is what everybody wants in life. This is the key to everybody finding happiness that their heart desires. Wouldn't you say? Within this kind of scheme, if you were to study it at length and really meditate on it, you'd find there's nothing for my happiness that I can't find there. So likewise, we could say it's expressing something about the fundamental purpose of life. And it's a key reference point in unification philosophy and theology. It's the fundamental purpose for which all people were created and will be fulfilled once men and women learn to fulfill those responsibilities fully. Now, there's another essential element to the viewpoint of the unification principles that I was really excited when I first heard it. Right? And it respects the origin, the rise, and the contribution of the world's great religions, really as part of an overall plan, I would say. You may know the work of, do you know the author Karen Armstrong? Anybody come across her work? I'm sure if you're in the interfaith field, you will know it very well. And she writes about this period of awakening, the emergence of kind of modern humankind in her book by the title The Great Awakening, or Great Transformation. That was published in 2006. In The Divine Principle, Reverend Moon's teaching, it really recognizes the forces at work in that period. It's like 400 to 600 BCE, before the Common Era. But this book was written in Korea, actually, in the 1950s and published in English first in 1969. So it really is very visionary for its time and place to understand that as part of its core teaching, there is a plan which involves a kind of transformation of humankind based on religious awakenings in quite a narrow period of human history. So it was all a kind of an environment that was heralding world transformation around this time. And there you can see some of the things which occurred around this very fruitful period. You had the Greek philosophers, not normally thought of as religious leaders, but in terms of this awakening of the spirit, they're very, very important, right? Socrates and then, Plato on the basis of that and others. You get, Zoroaster in Persia, you get Buddha in India, Lao Tzu and Confucius in China. You get developments in India with the Vedic teachers and the Upanishads coming around that time. You get this kind of extraordinary blossoming of places independent of one another, and yet somewhere they're almost like a spiritual connection there, getting the world ready for something. So it looks at this as part of its kind of teaching from first principles. And that's, I think, an important difference to many other interfaith efforts, as good and as absolutely valuable as they are, because we know many religious organizations, churches or other faiths, more recently have been rightly compelled to develop offices of kind of interfaith, relations, if you like. That's because, they're waking up to the reality we live in a multi-faith society, and we should relate, and understand other people's culture and background. But it's not so much from first principles, right? And this is something, I think, significant. Again, quoting from the Essentials of the Unification Principle, I want to mention something, but here's just harking back to Karen Armstrong herself. She said, as far as these sages were concerned, these wise men and women, or the founders of these religions, respect for the sacred rights of all human beings was religion. If people behaved with kindness and generosity to their fellows, they could save the world. This was the feeling amongst these common founders, if we go back to their original vision and teaching. It's amazing, isn't it, that it happened around that time. So the Unification Principle affirms the highest values of existing religions, so it says here in the Essentials of the Unification Principle, and shows them all to be part of God's plan to restore humanity to its original state and purpose. Thus, through the principle, a Christian can come to appreciate Jews and Muslims, for example, and it offers a way for believers to broaden their faith perspective without denying their own religious foundations. In a world rapidly shrinking in physical distances, this is increasingly important. No longer can one live in the luxury of cultural isolation. The principle provides a framework for integrating many of the disparate intellectual and spiritual forces of this age. Problems beset religious people and non-religious people alike, right? Our world it's full of difficulties. But it says here, no one can honestly pretend that he or she is without need of improvement. And it makes an interesting kind of suggestion, if you like. It says, if there is a line to be drawn between good and bad people, do you find yourself doing that? Right? It would not be drawn along any religious or ethnic divide, but rather between those people who sincerely make an effort to improve themselves and those who make no effort to improve. An interesting way to look at the world, isn't it, right? There's two groups of people. No need to say which group you are all in, right? You wouldn't be here otherwise, right? So a little bit of self-congratulation is okay, right? But not too much, right? So the first group contains people who selflessly seek out ways to serve and learn from others, while the second group contains people who selfishly seek to keep what they have, clinging to their own ideas, and seeking to impose themselves unrighteously on others. Among the first group are the humble peacemakers and reconcilers of the world, while among the second are the arrogant and greedy who engage in war and destruction in pursuit of unrighteous ambition. You know, there was a strapline of the Universal Peace Federation, I believe, when it was launched, marking its kind of development out of its predecessor, which was the Interreligious and International Federation for World Peace. Quite a mouthful. I personally think Universal Peace Federation is genius, actually, right? It's a very nice name. And this strapline, again, it really excited me and impressed me from the moment I read it. It said, beyond nationality and beyond religion. So the idea beyond religion, of course, shouldn't be taken the wrong way. It means our understanding and our relationship with the religious life has to be elevated or progressed to a new level beyond any kind of barriers. Actually, the Dalai Lama, he uses this title, Beyond Religion, in this spirit as a title for his book on universal ethics, if you've come across that. So Reverend Moon, it goes without saying, was an extraordinary man. There were two occasions in particular when I was in his presence. Both times it was 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning in a cold garage of a house in upstate New York, sitting on a concrete floor with about 200 or 300 other people. Right? But very precious moments. And much of what he said, I'm afraid, I couldn't remember. But these 2 points really struck me so much that I've remembered them, to this day. For the first, you have to know that his kind of initial core religious movement started in Korea was called Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. But it got the nickname Unification Church, although, his goal and his subsequent work was way beyond any kind of Christian-type organization. He stopped off his talk to us all, and he said, the destiny of the Unification Church is to not exist. Huh? Whoever founds a religious movement and said its goal is to not exist, right? That's, it's very rare to hear that. But I found it so liberating. I said, yes, that's what I want to be part of, right? It means, of course, we have to graduate beyond, what we are doing or what the organization is doing. And at a second time, the thing that struck me was, he said, do you think I like this religious life? And here's this very respected religious leader standing on the stage, in front of you, saying, do you think I like this religious life? He said, no, I don't. But I've researched every avenue, and I've concluded that in this time that we're living in, it's absolutely necessary. Yeah. So we need this kind of thinker, don't we, right? It kind of wakes you up a little bit. So put together, this aspect of his philosophy, I think, can be put as religion is not and should not be an end in itself. It's a means to an end. And in that statement alone is the answer to fundamentalism of whatever persuasion, you find it. Finally, I'd like to touch on the core work of our founder, Reverend Moon. This is the work in the area of marriage and family. He always saw it as a key to world peace. You can't talk about world peace without talking about progress in the area of marriage and family. And exemplified in the work that he and his wife have done, and she continues to do, in bringing the marriage blessing to people, not only unificationists, but people of other faiths as well. Here he is talking, I think back in 1995. He said, throughout my life, I have practiced the way of true love and educated people about it. I have lived for the sake of others and created a worldwide foundation. I have raised young people in each nation to live unselfishly for the sake of others. Not only that, I have also conducted international marriage blessing ceremonies, in order to establish ideal families of true love that are international, interracial, and interreligious. This is the work that changes the history of human culture. Centered on true love, we have brought down national barriers and have gone beyond racial barriers to overcome hatred. We have fought to give birth to ideal families that live for the sake of one another. As a result, we are forming a new world culture. Every religion, in sharing its stories, it uses metaphor, right? To describe the transformation process, which is possible and which is absolutely needed in the individual, and on that basis, I think reflecting in society, that's where it becomes the great transformation. Different metaphors are used. You have Jesus talking about being born again, but it's a metaphor, right? Reverend Moon had a particular metaphor that he used, right? And I'm going to illustrate it with a picture today. There it is. Any orchard keepers here? Ever done a bit of that horticulture? Yeah. He's saying we have to become part of a renewed family of mankind that produces good fruit. So, still keeping the metaphor, right? So, what he is suggesting here is the transformation we need is like a grafting process. So, in the world up to now, maybe the fruit that we've produced is not the best fruit, right? And you have some trees like that. They don't produce good fruit. Nobody wants to eat. They look fine, but, not so delicious, right? So what do you have to do, or what can a farmer do? Can cut the whole crown of that tree, leave the strong trunk and the good root system, you can't change that, but you can graft, like in this picture, little cuttings from a tree that produces good fruit. And after a little while, it'll grow. It's the quickest way to multiply fruit trees. It'll grow and produce good fruit, and everybody will be happy. They won't be thinking, oh, what kind of tree was it before it was cut down in this way? It doesn't matter what it was. Likewise, we have to change as a human race. We have to go through some new stages of development for our survival, actually. Right? So, can we change our ancestors and our kind of lineage behind us? We can't, right? We are the fruit of that. But somewhere through this marriage blessing is coming a level of redemption and renewal for the family, and not just for the individual, which up to now has been, emphasized in many religious paths. So this is, very fascinating. It's metaphorical language, but it leads to something very profound, which is actually backed up by reality, I would say. Right? We can make a new start, and if it produces good results, it'll lessen the influence of the past and allow it to fade into history. And it's in the moment of marriage, especially if it's unmarried people coming together, then it's two lineages and two families joining, and if it can join in the best possible way, with the best kind of environment created for the raising of children, how wonderful that is, how much a key it is to actually influencing the world positively. So this is the thinking behind the marriage blessing. And because it goes along with education about practicing love in the family and raising virtuous young men and women, then it's not just in name, it's real, it's substantial. So finally, what does the Unification Principle say about the goal of these efforts? I'll leave you with this thought. A principled world would be populated by people who put the needs of others above their own needs. This virtuous character would be cultivated in the family and demonstrated in the principles and practices of social institutions and governments. Thank you very much. God bless you.